So today's going to be a little more of a demo, kind of setting you guys up so you guys can do stuff. It's going to be like maybe at most like 30 minutes of me kind of showing you what pair programming is, probably a lot shorter than that. And then what we'll do for the rest of this like allotted hour is we'll break up into groups. So we'll do this through Zoom, or if you guys want to, you can break off into some other part with a partner, and you'll do pair programming yourself. And so today basically is just going to be talking about like, well, what is pair programming, what's the benefits and all this stuff. So basics of pair programming is kind of what it sounds like. You basically have two people work on the same program at the same time. And it's less of both of you coding, but more like you have one person, usually they call the driver, and the other person's the navigator. And so basically one person's mostly doing the writing of the code. The other person's kind of like watching, maybe giving advice or saying, oh, you missed this, or like, oh, like, like kind of talking through it a little bit. Sometimes you're just literally just watching someone code. And it might sound very like, oh, like, I don't know, when I first heard this, I was like, oh, this sounds very like boring, if that makes sense. But the idea here is that you can basically use two minds to go together. So a few reasons why this would be used. One, the most like straightforward reason is that you have someone watching you code, so you're less likely to make mistakes or different errors. And errors, I don't mean like you've seen before, if I forget like a parentheses, you'll get like a syntax error. Sometimes those can be kind of tricky, but the big errors that are hard to catch are semantic errors. And if you look up like what semantic errors are, basically it's when your code runs, like it runs through, there's no error output. However, it doesn't do exactly what you wanted it to do. And usually that means like, oh, you might have like, for example, started at 1 instead of started at 0. Or it could be something much more complicated where you have a function that you thought was doing something but wasn't doing the full thing. So what's nice is that having someone else like be able to watch you is able to kind of like things like, it's basically watching you and seeing how you think. And so they're more likely to catch that. It's kind of like, just a proofreader essentially. There tend to be more formal ways to, not more formal, but like more like enterprisal kind of like structure this. This is what code reviews are. But usually that's done like asynchronously. It can be done together, but usually it's like, oh, you finish your code, you pass on to someone else, they read through your code, see if it works, do a test on it, and then they give you feedback. Like, oh, it looks good, or oh, there's some error here, or can you change this for, maybe we have a certain kind of standard of like coding or whatever, coding style guide and stuff. But pair programming, it's more like two people, usually at the same level, programming together. The other part that's nice, especially if you're first learning something, is that you are more likely to catch those little mistakes. You see someone else's style of coding versus their final product, which sometimes it's nice to see someone's final product, like the solutions from the Learn Labs. But sometimes it's also nice to see how someone else approaches the problem, because there's always many different ways you can approach the same problem and solve it. So this also allows you to kind of just like, see someone else's style, and you can ask them questions right then and there. It's like, oh, why are you doing this way? And going through. So that's kind of like the benefits mostly for like pair programming. Any questions about like anything else or any comments on about that? Pretty straightforward, hopefully, right? So usually if you're like physically with someone, you would just have like maybe one screen and like a keyboard. Sometimes people like have it like where they have their two monitors next to each other, maybe two laptops, and they're both remoted in with each other so they can affect the same code, so they can just hop in seamlessly. But it could just be simply like passing the keyboard back and forth. It's like, oh, can I step in? Let me try like writing this part. Or it can even be like, hey, I'm really stuck. Or like, I'm just not like in the, like I haven't had my morning coffee yet. Like, can you head good and try programming this part and then seeing how they go through it? What was I going to say now? Coffee distracted me. So what was I going to say? So pair programming, to be quite honest, I haven't done a whole lot of it like in my industry, like coding myself. Some places do it more often than others. It's considered more of an agile, AGILE kind of style. Not everyone does it. Some people do it different, some places do it differently. The few times I actually had done it was more naturally, like when I was at university, actually my first programming class, which was a astrophysics programming language called IDL. But that was the first time I actually did pair programming. And we didn't even know it was called pair programming because we were a bunch of physicists, so we didn't know what programming was really. But we ended up doing that exact thing. And it was really useful, Also sometimes though, it can be very like tiresome, be like, when you have someone who's just saying, oh, you forgot a semicolon. Well, it's a different language back then. But like, it's like, oh, you forgot this part. Like, yeah, I know. Okay, I'll get to it. But it can also be really beneficial when you're talking through a hard problem. Like when you're trying to write a function that isn't quite as intuitive, it's nice to bounce ideas off someone who's right there watching you code at the same time. Okay. All right. Any questions about this? Okay, cool. All right, so I will show you what I'm going to kind of like assign you guys. One thing we could have done is the labs and stuff. So this is something that you can actually plan, like I think I mentioned, I actually don't know if I mentioned it already to some people who came in a little later, but where you guys will be able to do pair programming, set it up for yourself for like the coming weeks and stuff like that. So right now I'm just kind of showing you guys, and we're kind of putting you guys together, and we'll work on that together. But it can be something that you guys put together yourself and organize. So that way I kind of like say like, well, it would be nice like if you guys pick like a lab ahead of time, like, okay, so-and-so is partnered up. Say, all right, we're going to work on this lab together for like an hour, and you guys can do pair programming together. But it'll be more independent in that way. And if you guys want, I can make it the groups random for yourself. Sometimes I think this makes sense, but sometimes people kind of try not to do it, or tend not to do it because it's more work. Is sometimes you can figure out your time yourself. So say, oh, I'm free at this time. So oh, I'm free at that time too. And then you guys join together. And then you guys can work on a lab. But today we're not going to do a lab. So I'm going to show you guys my screen. I'm just going to share my whole screen. It's easier. So, okay. So what we're going to do, has anyone heard of Kaggle.com? Okay, good. I see some nod stuff. So Kaggle does have, and oops, nope, sorry, I clicked the wrong button. So I'm just going to share out the link right now. Kaggle actually has some really interesting, some nice little tutorials. They're like mini tutorials, really. Kaggle.com/learn. You'll see like there's a bunch of like little things going through. Some of the stuff that we haven't gone over, like even like SQL, but deep learning we'll talk about later on, machine learning. So we're actually going to do the pandas part. And so pandas, this should cover pretty much everything that would have gone through sections 1 through 4, maybe a little bit of 5, but not much if any. So I think you'd be pretty safe. I'd be able to do this all yourself without having to like do too much research. But feel free, for example, go back to something, or just asking your partner, say, hey, like, how do I do this, right? So I'm actually going to go into this guy. And Kaggle has something called kernels, which are basically like little Jupyter notebooks running on here. Now, one thing to note is that, so there's a couple ways you can do this. One, you can work directly in this kernel. And you can see here, basically, it ends up being like a Jupyter notebook. I can run code like normal. The thing is that if you're not signed in, so you can see here I'm not signed in, the session will end after 15 minutes. And then you either have to sign in or just know that your work's going to be gone. So my suggestion, does anyone have a Kaggle account already? Okay, so you see some hands. Good. So you guys probably did some research. So I highly recommend it. It's another resource to go into. Also, they have a lot of other things like, competitions where you can literally earn money. But even besides that, there are things like data sets and stuff like that that can be really useful. But if you don't want to sign in, what you can do is just do file and then download notebook. And this will download whatever you see here. Now, there's a couple things to note here is that if you do download this, some of these exercise notebooks, you'll notice has, what's it called? Some of these packages. Some of these packages are likely not installed on your computer. So if you try running this, this won't work. So one thing they have is this learn tool. So since Kaggle is doing this as a tutorial, you'll see later down here is that there are functions that you can actually run to see, what's it called? To see what the solution is or get a hint and so on. Now, I don't think you guys will really need this, but if you wanted to see this as a kind of safety net, you basically have to run it in this kernel. There might be other ways for you to download it, but I'm not familiar with how to do that. I think you have to use the Kaggle API, but I don't want to keep that too complicated. But you can just download Notebook and run it in Jupyter Notebook. There's that IPNB. Okay, you can see down here. So, okay. So we'll go ahead and get started. So I did the first lesson here. So I'm just going to say, okay, welcome to, oops, click on this. So welcome to Learn Pandas Track. These hands-on exercises are targeted. So relevant resources, sometimes just reading it through. The first step in most data analytics projects is reading the data file. In this section, you'll create series and data frame objects, both by hand and by reading data files. So you'll note that this is a very quick and tutorial. This is probably going to be a lot easier than a lot of the Learn labs, but it'll get you an idea of like how to program together. So I can see here setup, run the code. So I'll go ahead and run this. So basically this should be BD set options, max rows. So this will get me some extra setup and stuff like that. And you can see here, setup complete. Okay, so now I'm going to kind of jump in more like on pair programming. So I want you guys will be more like my navigators. So as a navigator, you guys are kind of like seeing things. If you see something I do and you're just like, oh, like how do you do that? You can ask those questions too. That's what's nice about pair programming. You can teach each other back and forth. You don't have to necessarily have just the person coding be the only one asking questions or only one actually doing any code. You can switch it off if you really want to. Okay, so I say, okay, in the cell below, create a data frame fruits that looks like this. So I want a data frame that looks like this, apples and bananas. Your code goes here, create a data frame matching the above diagram, the scientific variable fruits. Okay, so I want fruits to be a data frame that looks like this. And I'm gonna kind of play the role here. I don't really remember how to do this. Does anyone know how to do this? How to make a data frame from scratch?
np.array, and then you do it as like a tuple set inside.
Oh, what's that?
You do it like a tuple set inside. So you would do, in this case, you would do
Yeah, so that, yeah, it's okay. And this is one like, maybe both you guys might be fuzzy on the details, right? So one thing you can do is like, okay, like, well, I want to create a data frame. Let's just look it up, right? So let's say Andis data frame, data frame. Okay, and here's the documentation. So I'm going to click on that. And you can see here, PD, okay, there's a whole bunch of stuff, data frame, data equals. Okay, so I probably have to do something like passing the data, right? So what's nice is that this documentation probably has some examples. Like, okay, cool, look at this. So we can see here, they have some, looks like a dictionary, right? Column 1, and then here's, looks like the data. Column 2, here's data. Let's do a PD data frame of data equals D. Okay, so I think I can do this, right? This maybe column 1 will be banana or apple. Column 1, 2 is bananas, and then I'll just have just one item in each. Okay, so I'm going to try to do that. So I think NumPy might have worked. Again, there's a bunch of ways we could do this, right? So, but I'm just going to try it this way, since I'm the driver. Data frame, and then I'll do it the same way I sound the thing. So I'll say like D for data, right? And then I'll do apples. 30, and then bananas. And feel free to jump in if you're just like, oh wait, like, is that right? Or change things up. Okay, that should work. And what's nice here is that there's a little check that goes on here. So if you run this, hopefully it'll run fine. Oh, something didn't work. Didn't like this. If using all scalar values, you must pass an index. Your code, so there's an issue here. Does anyone see what might have gone wrong?
I tried putting, when you call PD.data frame, put your D in square brackets.
Okay, let's see.
Yeah, see if that.
Oh, look at that. Cool.
Why is that? Does it prefer a list?
Yeah, so let's check this out. So I'm kind of playing a little bit of like little dumb here, right? Like it's like, oh, I don't know, why does it do that? So then the good thing is always going to documentation. And then what I like to say is that reading documentation is like another language. And so like it does get some use to it here. If you can't find it, we can go search directly on Stack Overflow. But we'll look at the data here. So data is what we passed in. And we see an ND array, structured, homogeneous, iterable, dict, or data frame. So it looks like these are all the different types you can pass in for data. So this dict can contain a series, arrays, constants, or lists like, oh, okay. So if you look here, I passed a dictionary originally, right? So that dictionary, it says it can only have series, arrays, constants, or list-like objects. But you'll notice when I had the code here, you'll see that the dictionary doesn't have a list. It's just an integer set. Okay, so that was probably why I got an error to begin with. It's like, oh, I don't like that. But it looks like Jenny had to put in, said, oh, let's put what's it called, a list around that. Well, that kind of makes sense now. It's because this data can be a list or iterable. So I think what it's trying, or is this here, ND array, structured homogeneous. And I believe what's happening here is that we're basically passing in, Pandas is trying its best to figure out what you're trying to do. So if we try to, for example, let's just try to add a new kernel here. So this is like the good things, like, oh, let's check it out. So if I do D like that, you can see here, it becomes more of a list thing, and that's interpreted more like an array. And I think it's able to figure out, oh, okay, Apple's supposed to 30. My guess is that I don't know if this would actually make a difference. My guess is that this version of Pandas for the data frame is interpreting this like, okay, it's trying its best to figure out what are you trying to say. And so I think if I do this, this should also still work. No, good, so this didn't work. And you can see here, it's because it passes it in as these values. So I think what happens is that—
because you still have it around the D as well.
Yeah, like, exactly. Right, so if I got rid of this, this should work then, right? Yeah. So, and I think it's something, the way it parses through, this isn't super obvious to me. Like Jenny had put out, I'd probably like have to like do some more like Stack Overflow search and be like, why can you do it this way or something? Or it might literally ask a question, like I might type in a question, say to Stack Overflow and say, does anyone know why this works? And there's some people who really understand like the structure of Pandas and stuff like that, who could probably go into full detail, like exactly why this happens. But for me, I'm like, I probably will say, well, let's get rid of this because I'm not really sure how that works, but I know that I made a mistake right here, which is probably what we should do. So good job. And this again, like more like pair programming, where you're like, okay, you see a mistake, maybe someone else has it. And you guys can see here, for example, if I had done the hint, there's the hint of what you do, use the data frame constructor. So I know Melvin had mentioned about NP array. You possibly could do it with NP array too, but you'll probably eventually have to call the data frame structure eventually. And we can actually look at the solution and you can see, so they did it even a different way. Oh, you guys can't see that very well, can you? Let's just copy that so it'll be easier to read. I don't know why it does that, that's dumb. Okay, so you can see their solution right here is you basically pass in the values right here, and then they have the columns. So that's another way you could have done it. So how about this good nice to see solution? Okay, so yeah, do you guys want to see like how another part I'm gonna go through? Okay, so again, jump in, like just like I did if I made a mistake. So create a data frame, fruit sales that matches the diagram. Okay, so I want to make it look like this. Code goes here, create a data frame matching the diagram. Oh wait, so this isn't just a two. So there's two different values, which I think I can do pretty easily. There's also this guy, because before we just had, we had an index 0. Okay. Well, okay, I'm going to start off with what I do now. So I'll do a PD data frame. Oops. And then I'll have my dictionary. Let's try the dictionary. Okay, this is my data dictionary. And I'll have apples. And this will be 35, 41. And then bananas. Oops. And what do we have? 21, 34. Okay, so I know this, I know they can do this, but if I probably do, let's do, well, it should display on the bottom here. So you can see it was incorrect, which I knew was going to happen. I have apples and bananas. Okay, so I need to change this index. Anyone got an idea what we should do? So yeah, so let me go back to documentation, check that out. Okay, so I want to change the index. So it looks like I can pass index, and it looks like none usually. So index to use for resulting frame will default to range index if no indexing information. So it looks like a range index would probably be 0, 1, 2, 3. So that makes sense. Okay, so if I scroll down now, I'm just going, okay, let me see if there's an example. See if they showed an example of this. I don't see an example of an index. So we can just try it out, right? So let's try passing an index. And let's look at index or array like. So array like is like a list, right? Right? Yeah. So I guess I could go like data equals D, index equals, let's try sales. Ooh, that didn't work right. Anyone got an idea?
Well, I would think it would be the 2017 sales, 2018 sales.
Oh, right. So like gotta have two different values, right?
Yeah, but
Mm.
maybe. I don't know if that'll work.
Yeah. What's nice about programming is we can always try it, right? And see if it works out. Okay, it's like that, right?
Well, you need the like quotations.
Oh, I forgot the quotation. Oh, silly me. Hey, okay, cool.
Oh,
So it works. All right, awesome. All right, thanks, Lauren. Okay, so yeah, so you can kind of see a little bit. I was trying to be a little slower and a little bit, like not sure exactly, because I'm sure some of you, this stuff, you guys will go through it really quickly. I'm sure, like, for example, this one's going to be a little bit different for you guys. There's no shame, for example. What's nice is that you guys kind of have an additional, because it's a tutorial, you can also see there's a hints and stuff like that and run it on the kernel itself. I suggest if you guys are doing this, I would say make sure you sign in if you're going to do it on this kernel, because then your thing doesn't get paused in the middle of like you guys working together. Okay, cool. So any questions about how this kind of would work? Okay, so I realize there's only 5 of us, well, 5 of you guys here, and I want to pair you guys up. Yeah, I'm surprised no one else is showing up today. Okay, so I'm actually going to stop the recording here since that's all that we really need to care about. Are there any other questions about pair programming or how it works in general?
So in practical terms, we're just going to do this by going into a Zoom session and screen sharing, not actually controlling each other's devices, just screen share.
Yeah, you could probably screen share. I think you can like relinquish control to people if you want to. When you guys obviously both get logged out, but like when what's it called? When you guys do this like on your own, there's a few ways you could do it. You could keep using Zoom. I think you could even use Slack video call. If you guys have another tool that you guys enjoy using, that you guys agree on, you can do that too. For example, I was gonna say FaceTime, but FaceTime you can't share screen share. I don't know if anyone's ever used that. But there's a bunch of other things, but mostly you guys all have Zoom, so you guys know you can do that. If you guys need like a specific like it's called like room. So one thing is I think Zoom by default, I think you can only have up to 30-minute meetings. If you're not on a pro account, maybe it's an hour meeting. But if you guys want, I think I can set up meeting groups for you guys ahead of time. So just message me and I can set that up. And then I think you guys can just join in and deal with that. You see, this is locked out right now. So like I can't, I won't be able to change things up. Yeah, but right now we'll do Zoom. So I'll break you guys into groups. Cool. Any other questions though about pair programming? Cool. I'll stop here.